Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, return to the NES, Animal Heroes Edition. Some years ago, when I began this show, hard to believe it's been over 4 years at this point, and I started talking about the video games I've played to the internet at large, I began my time in podcaster land with the NES. The NES, like the Master System, was in the early days of the mascot platformer. It wouldn't yet reach the heights of something like, say, Sonic the Hedgehog or Crash Bandicoot, but when a little pastiche Italian plumber began to take over the North American gaming market in a way that hadn't been seen since Atari unleashed a yellow, google-eyed, endlessly hungry ghost-hunting sphere upon the arcade scene, the race was on for the next big blockbuster critter or caricature-focused game. And boy howdy, were we awash in them. If it wasn't a direct low-poly arcade port or a nondescript sports game that could in no way feature or support any famous players of the day, then it was some sort of creature, robot, or bastardized myth in the driver's seat. Or maybe a ninja. Lots of ninja-themed games back then, too. In any case, there were a number of creature feature games I had that I didn't cover in my initial talk on the NES. The ones I will be showcasing today are what I call animal heroes. The concept of an animal being the central focus of a tale. One with its own voice and more than animal intelligence. The anthropomorphized main character that the listener of the tale could relate to, insert their personality into, or learn a lesson from. Has long been with us as a species set apart from other creatures we share this planet with. There are certainly echoes of animal heroes in works as early as the Epic of Gilgamesh. But the one I found as a child, as I'm sure many kids did or were introduced to, was Aesop's Fables. The fox who taught us about sour grapes, the hare and the tortoise who ran a race to teach us that steady focus on a goal is better, the mouse who removed the thorn from the lion's paw to instill kindness. Hardly, however, has the Western European-centric culture that I, and I am guessing many of you wonderful listeners out there, have been raised in, be the only one who has a monopoly on animal heroes and their fables and instructional stories. From India comes a story of a danger of misplaced compassion featuring a tiger, jackal, and Brahmin. Africa brings us a clever spider using its wits to teach a resourcefulness. China brings us its famous arrogant monkey king, who needs to learn about redemption. And Japan has tales of foxes and identity, among other things. We have clung tightly to this in the modern day, with heroic police and firefighter pups teaching kids about safety, pastel ponies involved in wacky hijinks themed around the value of friendship, and of course Disney has made its multi-millions off of the backs of a menagerie of animated deer, mice, elephants, cats, and just about every other four-legged friend under the sun. Those stories translated very easily into the realm of video games, as the market was recovering from its early 1980s crash and rapidly evolved into the scene it would become in the early 1990s. So, without further delay, let's begin this selection of animal hero games. Oh, and speaking of tortoises, in 1987, one of the hottest properties in the world that had yet been known would drop on the unsuspecting heads of kids across America in the form of 4 mutated turtles trained in the art of stealth and murder. Well, at least that's how they were in the original comic book debut a few years earlier. But Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were made kid-friendly and would become a monster that children loved and parents dreaded hearing any more about or spending their hard-earned money on. In 1989, the rights to the property would be bought by Japanese developer Konami, who were on a roll with games like Contra and Castlevania, among others, to bring a video game version of the Fab Four of the Reptile set to the home console. Every kid in America who owned an NES couldn't wait to get a copy to play at home. However, this was not really the game we expected to get. That same year, an arcade Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game arrived, which was a 4-player beat 'em up responsible for sucking up more quarters than every couch worldwide combined. That beat 'em up, also by Konami, was technically a sequel to the NES game. The NES title was an action platformer instead, and a hard one at that. Our 4 turtle heroes were on a grand tour of Manhattan and the boroughs, hunting down the nemesis, the Foot Clan, to rescue their friend April O'Neil, and to gain a special weapon that could return their master Splinter to his human form. This would involve the player traipsing through warehouses and sewers full of robot goons and monsters made of fire for some reason, hitting up some of those well-known tourist hotspots in all New York City, and battling it out with the staple cast of villains and freaks of the kids' TV show. And of course, who could forget the dreaded dam level, where your turtle of choice had to swim through electrified kelp to hurriedly disarm several bombs that would otherwise end your game entirely. Each turtle could only be played one at a time, and once defeated, you had to switch to another. Based on the navigation of the maze-adjacent levels, some turtle characters were better than others, by which I mean pick Donatello to play as because his weapon of choice, the staff, hits hard and phases through the scenery both upwards and downwards, and can wipe out threats long before you need to meet them face to face. That's really not much more to it than that. Defeat a maze, drive around a top-down surface of the world in the turtle van, rinse and repeat. That beat 'em up is what we were hoping to get at home. But as I said earlier, we got an unexpected action platformer that everyone I knew struggled through like it was an 8-bit Dark Souls. Game reviews at the time were all over the place, from outlets review bombing it as absolute unbalanced trash, to outlets reviewing it as if it were the second coming in Terrapin form, and one of the best platformers they'd ever seen. I can't say I agree with either view. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a NES game anyway, was certainly one of the games of all time, but it was very quickly overshadowed by its arcade brethren, and it was certainly overshadowed in my mind by much better and much more fun Turtles games. The legacy of this title is what is of real importance about the game, however. It helped establish a set of rules future TMNT game properties would operate under. And of course, it shored up the storyline established by the television series and later movies. If nothing else, this title was consistent, not straying far from the established fictional universe of an alternate New York defended from its stinking, steaming underground by mutant guardian angels using a facsimile of martial arts and duping Pizza Hut delivery boys into dead dropping their only source of nutrition. It is a game you can still find and play, but I wouldn't recommend it when better games set in this universe are available to play. The astronomical success of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set off its own minor rush by television and movie executives in the late 1980s, looking to siphon from the teat of capitalism by developing their own look-alike squad of fighting mutant animals, looking to dish out justice one punch at a time. So we were served a bouillabaisse of creature features and childhood media. Martian biker mice, two-legged land sharks, cats with Air Force service records. There were even parodies of this parody, for the idea behind the Ninja Turtles was a parody of 1970s kung fu films and Marvel Comics superheroes. But in 1991, developer Rare Limited would bring to the NES the Battletoads, 3 mutated space frogs whose fists and feet turned into literal hammers, anvils, and other Wile E. Coyote-themed beat-em-up devices in a game of interstellar pursuit of the buxom Dark Queen and her army of pig warriors to recover a missing space princess, while the Toads' wise vulture father figure gave them hints from the sidelines. Sound familiar? The NES Battletoads was a hybrid of beat-em-up, action platformer, racing game of all things, and time trials of player endurance and character survival. The first level, where the players land on a red planet to pummel pigmen, was the easiest of introductory levels. After that, every bet is off. The third stage, the first of the game's racing levels, was the one that usually did me in, where I would waste all my lives and continues trying to get past the misaligned jumping mechanics and sudden obstacles that would appear on screen faster than I could react to. This game ran like crap for me, and it only got worse as the game went on. It took me a solid month of trying to get past that third level, and it felt like a minor miracle when I finally did, only for me to quickly die in the ice cavern platforming fourth level, where the toads slipped around like greased hogs into spikes and rolling ice boulders, and I was all out of continues, so my time with the battle toads was over. A concept artist for Rare at the time, named Kevin Bayliss, said back then that the Battletoads were conceived to, quote, produce merchandise, unquote, on a mass scale. Something that didn't really happen, given what they were up against and the saturation point of the market by then. But Battletoads did spawn a number of sequels and even a crossover with the Double Dragon franchise. Yeah, the game was okay. I enjoyed the brawler levels, but I didn't enjoy everything else. Yes, I know a lot of folks have gone on to lionize this title, and it received great reviews in its era for being innovative, or how the cartoon cutscenes elevated this title beyond its contemporaries. All of that is just so much commercial pap and jargon as far as I'm concerned. I don't blame Rare for wanting to make money on a popular style of commercial property. It certainly has been a feather in their collective portfolio, after all. And the rather extreme difficulty this game is notorious for is neither here nor there. For myself, I have no further interest in this title or series beyond its initial NES outing, and I cannot recommend it other than to the kind of player that feels enjoyment and vindication into slamming their head against busted, unnecessarily hard games until their own personal sense of superiority is fulfilled. To me, this game was overall boring and somewhat disappointing. But hey, I guess I'm in the minority on this one, which is fine by me. Released originally in the arcades in 1986 by developer Taito, Bubble Bobble stars two adorable chibi dragons named Bub and Bob, who use their ability to blow bubbles that trap and pop a variety of enemies across 100 platform levels on their quest to rescue their girlfriends. The plot couldn't be any simpler, and I wish I could say there was some sort of trick to this, but there isn't. I played this on the NES port, one of the multiple ports of this game received across just about every system available at the time, such as the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Apple II, and Master System. The real story here is that my childhood best friend and I sunk untold hours into this title in couch co-op, and I don't think we could ever really get that far into the game. It was cute and a ton of fun, but then again, back then I was measuring fun by a bit of an uncomplicated childhood standard. What I did not know at the time is that the reason we saw this on the NES, beyond the voraciousness of porting every arcade game possible to home console, was that Bubble Bobble was a blockbuster arcade title in 1986 in Japan, and the UK saw this title rise to great heights and success in their arcades. But I can't say I ever saw an arcade cabinet of Bubble Bobble anywhere when I was a kid in the US. Perhaps I missed them, or perhaps home console was the only option. Regardless, this game has developed quite the legacy, has been re-released across more modern systems in various arcade archives, and even had a few latter-day sequels. This one I can recommend easily, even for a game to just kill some time with. There's nothing wrong with simple, silly fun titles with ultra-basic premises, dear listeners. And this one can easily be worth your time. When I mentioned the Walt Disney Corporation in the preamble to this review, it wasn't by accident. Animal hero focused games and television shows were their bread and butter in the late 1980s and early 1990s, filling the gaps between Academy Award nominated motion pictures during the so called Disney Renaissance. In the first season of the show, I reviewed, however briefly in retrospect, 1989's DuckTales video game, developed by Capcom, which it turns out was a heavily modified version of Mega Man, which was easy for Capcom to produce since they already owned that property in-house. Capcom quickly followed that up with 1990's Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, a game based on the successful Disney Afternoon cartoon block and series, which often included the DuckTales cartoon as well. Chip and Dale get an update from their previous history as Disney's mischievous chipmunk duo who tormented Donald Duck and sometimes Mickey Mouse. Back before those characters decided to pick up keyblades and convoluted plots like collector's edition tchotchkes, and morph them into 80s smooth criminal hunting detectives, with Chip dressed copyright infringingly like Indiana Jones, and Dale dressed like 1980s mustachioed heartthrob Magnum P.I. This plot is as easy as it comes. Chip and Dale must rescue their detective friends from their nemesis, Fat Cat, by hurling boxes and apples at reject critters from Disney's villain central casting against the backdrop of a larger human-ruled world. It was produced by Tukoro Fujiwara, who was previously worked on Mega Man 2 and Ghosts and Goblins. And the DNA of both of those titles is on clear display in this game. And I could swear this is just another Mega Man mod turned into a family-friendly Disney title. The game was a success, selling 1.2 million units worldwide, and was the fourth highest selling game for the NES. And it reviewed very positively for the year of its release by what game journalism outlets existed back then. Like many Capcom titles of its time, it was praised for its outstanding graphics and friendly gameplay, offering a cooperative two-player or single-player experience. Some said it was too easy, but others found it tough but enjoyable. I did not find it too easy back then, but I also breezed through this title so regularly that if I knew what a speed one was back then, I'd have considered trying my hand at that. But I'm a little too old for that now, unfortunately. Rescue Rangers is just good, clean, and simple fun. Joy in an 8-bit cart. And I feel it's a great addition to any NES fan's library of games. So this one is a solid recommendation from me. It's not very long, probably not more than a half hour or so in length play, but definitely worth your time if you are young or young at heart and into the retro scene. And there you have it, folks. 4 Animal Hero games from a simpler time in my life that I played but didn't really qualify for their own separate review shows. Sometimes going back to these old games is a great dopamine hit. And sometimes I have to wonder about myself with certain titles, seeing them through adult eyes with all their flaws on display. How could I possibly have liked them as a kid? But that's just the thing, of course. You aren't seeing them as an adult. You are seeing them with simple wonder, when jaded cynicism hasn't set in yet. Unless you had a particularly miserable older siblings or cousins grousing at you while you played. And in many cases, that lack of life experience can be all the factor that determines how kindly you recall these old titles. And in some cases, almost 40 years past now. That is still hard to wrap my head around sometimes. Not every game I played on the NES is a winner, though. This episode is actually part 1 of 3-part installment of a retrospective series on the NES. Stay tuned for part 2, where it gets unusual. Until then, thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Mass Llama, Martin Kubel, and the many listeners and supporters for being patrons and fans of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.